I wasn't a big fan of rock and roll photography when I was studying photography. I was more interested in portraiture. I also wanted to try and do something a little bit different. Growing up, I idolised David Bowie and Mark Bolan, and I didn't want to know anything about their private lives particularly. I would have hated him Instagramming his breakfast every day. You know, I wanted to think he lived in a spaceship and ate moon dust. You want your idols to be untouchable, really. And I think bands these days are just telling us too much. When I first photographed Bowie, I was very intimidated by the idea that I was photographing Bowie. I'd had pictures of him on my wall when I was a teenager, and I was hamstrung by that, and it took me ages to get over it. And the first session I did with him, I probably shot normally I'd shoot maybe 3 rolls of film if I was doing a shoot for the NME, and I shot 10 rolls of film, and I had this absolute sinking feeling every roll I took that it was worse than the last one. And I didn't dare ask him to do anything. I was hamstrung by the fact that he was my idol. I went into the rehearsal room and everything was more relaxed, and I took a couple of pictures, and I wasn't sure whether I'd been invited in just to watch or whether I could photograph him. And then he sat on the edge of the drum riser and had a cigarette, and I just thought, that's going to be our cover shot. And he heard the camera click and looked over at me and raised an eyebrow and gave me the shot I wanted. Before all day drinking, and when the licensing hours changed, virtually every single session in the NME was taken between 3:10 and 5:30 when the pubs closed and when they reopened. The interview would be done in the pub, then you'd be kicked out, so you'd have a 2-hour window to take the pictures because there was nothing else to do, and then you'd be back in the pub for 5:30. My responsibility is to almost, especially with a young band who aren't that well known, is to show you what they're like and what they might sound like. All I want is them to engage with me and not just focus on the end of the lens. I want them to look through the camera at me. My job, like I say, is to get the best picture, and it doesn't really matter how you do that. You've got to get the best picture possible. I think sometimes with musicians, it's best to let them run with their idea. If you've got a specific idea you want to use for a picture, then you'll get there, but shoot 2 or 3 things that they want first, and then say, well, look, how about if we do this, and ease them into a few of the things you want to do. And I think if there's the trust there, they're going to let you do that anyway. I mean, the thing with Morrissey is he tends to strike his own pose, and you work round that a little bit. I did a picture of him in Cologne where I was going to photograph him from a bridge on the stairwell of the bridge, and just before I started taking pictures, he lay down as if he was falling down the stairs, and this little kid about 5 or 6 years old walked past him and just looked at him. Well, that gave me a really great picture. I think if you shoot with a lot of space, it enables them to be more creative with the picture. I also wanted to try and do something a little bit different, which is why I think the Joy Division picture in the snow on the bridge works, because it's so bleak and the band are almost incidental to the picture. I wanted them to look like serious young men. And you know, there's shots I took in the rehearsal room where he looks very, very isolated against a black wall. But the reality of that shot is Bernard's on one side of him and Hookie's on the other, and Stephen's next to me, and they're all telling jokes and just acting like lads in their early 20s, you know. But I had to get Ian to zone out and not think about what they were doing. It wasn't my job to show what Ian was like in his off-duty time. I wanted to show what he was like when he was with the band, and I think that was really important. I'm so glad that I photographed David Bowie, Ian Curtis, and Michael Hutchence, and Mark Bolan, and people who died far too young. I'm glad I had a moment with them, because they've added an awful lot to my life. When I studied photography, I didn't really like standard rock and roll imagery. You know, I was much more interested in photographers like Diane Arbus and August Sander and Bill Brandt, and I wanted to try and do something a little bit different with rock and roll imagery. When you're photographing someone, it's not as isolated as people think it is when they're looking at those pictures, and it's understanding how to work with people always that makes a great picture. It doesn't just happen by chance.